I've come here today to meet Edward Pentin, Rome correspondent for the National Catholic Register and one of the leading observers of all the goings-on in the Vatican today. He's also the author of The Next Pope, just published. He's on pilgrimage to Walsingham for the first time, and I'm going to speak to him about his life in Rome and also his experience here in Walsingham so far. Hello Edward.
Hello Kevin, good to see you.
Very good to see you. Welcome to Walsingham.
Thank you, it's great to be here.
Wonderful. So Edward, is this really your first time in Walsingham?
It is, I'm ashamed to say, yes. As an Anglican, it wasn't really on the map, and since I've become a Catholic, I've lived mostly outside the country, so I haven't really had the chance to see it, and so it was nice to come up this weekend to have a look.
Well, you're coming at a very unusual time, of course.
Yes, and not the usual Feast of the Assumption crowds, of course. It's been very quiet, but lovely at the same time.
Yeah, you've almost had the place to yourself.
Well, yes, that's true.
Yeah. So Edward, you're on pilgrimage to Walsingham, but we're actually meeting in Pentin Priory,
yes,
which is a couple of miles outside Walsingham, and I hope you'll agree, is a very impressive structure, if a very slightly poignant one.
Yes, very much, and one I haven't actually heard of before, so it's nice to come here to see it.
I believe this was a thriving medieval Benedictine monastery which was destroyed by Henry VIII,
yes,
at the same time that Walsingham was suppressed as a shrine. Perhaps we could walk around a little bit of
Sure.
it. So, I mean, you're an Englishman living abroad at the moment.
Yes, that's right.
How does it feel just being back in England at this current time?
Well, I mean, it's certainly very very unusual, but I think it feels like a certain pivotal point in the church's history, at least, regarding the coronavirus and how it's affected the church. So it's quite interesting to be here and seeing how it's affected it, and maybe look ahead to how it's going to affect the church in the future.
So, Edward, how long have you been in Rome?
I've been in Rome now 18 years, so a long time.
18 years,
yes.
Yeah. And you've been reporting for the Register, the National Catholic Register, and EWTN from there during that time?
Yes, and full-time for the last 5 years or so.
And that means you've seen, let me count, 3 popes?
3 popes, that's right. The end of John Paul II, and then all of Benedict, and now Francis, yeah. So very interesting and very diverse periods of the papacy.
Is there a noticeable difference when one pope dies and a new pope comes? Is there a kind of changing of the guard?
Well, very much so. Of course, you don't really see the changes until a bit further down the line, but yes, there's always big changes, and not so much with John Paul and Benedict, because they were very similar in many ways, but with Francis it's been quite a different phase. Yeah.
Would you say Rome is a happy place at the moment?
It depends who you talk to. I think some people think it's great, it's a time of change and reform. Others are very concerned about it, and they're not happy at all, and they feel that there's been a lot of upheaval and a lot of unnecessary upheaval. Those are the ones I hear mostly, but as I say, it's the ones you hear, the ones you talk to. Depends who you talk to, yeah.
And you've just published the Next Pope is the
Yes,
book, I think.
That's right.
What was your thinking around that? Why did you publish that now?
Well, the idea actually came from friends of mine who wanted to create this book about 3 or 4 years ago, and it was done. Actually, started without me. It was done through other researchers, 14 researchers we had on the book, and they'd been working on this, getting these 19 cardinal candidates researched, and then I came along and basically helped put it together and filled in the gaps, and finished it off. And so it's that's how it came about. The book is really to give the cardinals primarily, equip them in the next conclave so they know exactly who they're voting for, because in the past they haven't known their brother cardinals very well. In fact, just like us, they don't really know who they are because they haven't met them, they haven't got to know them. So this is a way of getting to know the cardinals in detail, without and so that they're properly equipped when they go into the Sistine Chapel.
So it almost sounds like you've created a handbook.
Well, it is. It is a kind of
runners and riders almost.
Yes, although we haven't handicapped them. We haven't said which ones we think are more likely or not.
I have to bite my tongue and say they handicap themselves, or the Holy Spirit will handicap them.
That's right, yes.
How long does it take to write a book like that?
Well, as I say, it started about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's a long process because we had to get the right researchers to look into each candidate from around the world and to have the language abilities too. So it took a while, but the actual sort of putting to get the final touches together, I think, took about 6 months to a year. So.
And this is on top of all your journalism, right?
That's right, yes, yeah. So
I mean, you're pretty prolific on the Register.
Well, yeah, there's a lot to report on.
Yes, there is.
Especially under Francis, so it keeps us very busy. That's why I say it's been very different under Francis. But very more interesting in many ways. It's certainly livened things up and shaken things up, and that's been interesting. It's certainly got more stimulating and more, as I say, more interest, especially from the faithful as well.
I mean, sometimes reporting from Rome, especially for a Catholic media outlet, it becomes kind of inside Catholic, you know, a sort of like a... Yes. Whereas some of the stories you've broken have completely gone worldwide. I mean, the Vigano letter, for example.
That's right, yes. I mean, if there's a thing to lament, I think it's the fact that it's become a little too inward-looking. It's all been... Under Benedict and Francis, it was more about the Church engaging with the world and reporting on that. Mm-hmm. Whereas now, because of the internal politics that's sort of overridden the Church now, it's become... That's rather overtaken it. And it's not so attractive, I think.
No.
It's all about the internal fighting, and that's not really what we're about. We're about going out and evangelizing. And I think, in a way, it's a pity that it's become like that, because, you know, as I say, the Church is more about being apostles and going out, and it's not about looking inward. And in fact, Pope Francis didn't want this. He didn't want a self-referential church, but in a sense, that's what we have, unfortunately.
How do you manage to maintain your faith, your personal faith?
I've always known, since I was received into the church, that we are all fallible, weak, sinful human beings, and it's almost to be expected that you'll get this with those who make up the church. And so I've always managed to be able to separate those two, that there's the sacramental aspects, there's the church, which can never be corrupted, and then there's the human element. And I've always been able to separate the two. So to me, it doesn't harm my faith. I've always been able to separate those two. Because
you've come at a time of momentous change and turmoil for various reasons in the church.
Yes.
But you've also come at a time when there's been scandal after scandal after scandal, right. Not just in America, but across the world.
Yes.
And it's disheartened many Catholics, and I think people in the Catholic media who have to report on this stuff day in, day out, as you do.
Yes.
I mean, somebody once said to me that that's the biggest cross of a Catholic journalist. Would you agree?
Well, it is, but at the same time, I see it as a time of grace. I know it's very painful for us all to seal this, but it is a time of great... I think it's a time of cleansing. All of this stuff is coming to the surface, it's being revealed. In a sense, it was all under the surface, and until it could sort of come to the surface, it would always be there. So this is a necessary process, I think, of a certain cleansing, a certain purification of the church. Through Francis, we have this period of revelation, if you like, of all of the sickness which has sort of lingered under the surface, coming to the surface, and
that's a really interesting sort of image, because really, if you have a wound and it gets infected, you've got to get all the infection out before the wound can actually heal.
Exactly.
Is that the kind of thing you're thinking?
Yes, it is. It is. And you know, Benedict and John Paul were great popes, of course, but there was all of that sort of festering under the surface never really came to the top. Certain aspects did, of course. You know, we had the whole legionaries scandal, but mostly it didn't. And I think now you're seeing sort of also not just the scandals, but the doctrinal problems. All of the things that have come in the last 50 years have really bubbled up, and now they can be tackled. That's the way I see it.
But I guess also what you're saying is that I mean, it's not as if these issues, these debates, these challenges weren't there already. I mean, you know, they just didn't pop up overnight. So cardinals that come out with statements that are a bit odd, or say things, or trying to move the church. I mean, this was as you say, bubbling under the surface, and now it's revealed.
Yes.
But what about, I mean, you said earlier when you received into the church, so you haven't been a Catholic all your life?
No, I was received in 1998 in North London, the Benedictines in North London. And it was, yes, it was quite a journey. It was. I was brought up Anglican in Canterbury, in fact. So I was confirmed by Robert Runcie as an Anglican, and
really?
And now, and then I was, then I became a Catholic in '98. So I've been Catholic for a while now. I think of myself as perhaps 22-year-old Catholic, if you like. Yeah. Even though I don't look it.
So how do you feel as an Englishman when you come and you see the remains here of Catholic England? You know, that was a lot longer in existence than Protestant England.
Yes. Well, one of the things that attracted me to becoming Catholic was, on my journey, was reading this book about how, about English Catholicism. And to me, reading that book was all about the English authors like Chesterton and Newman, of course, and the various great English Catholics of the past. And to me, that was the real essence of Englishness, was the Catholic England. And it really struck home to me that it was really much coming home, not just coming home in spiritually too, but also one sense of country and nationhood. And it really did feel like the true heart of England is Catholic. Yeah.
And coming to Walsingham, do you feel you've come to the capital of that true heart, the centre of that true heart?
Yes, yes. I mean, it's quite surprising to me. I'd never expected it to be quite so. It's a very English. It's almost like going back to the pre-Reformation England here. It really, because you have all these, statues of Mary in the windows of the houses, and it just seems very that popular piety that was there pre-Reformation. You just see it, and it's wonderful to see. Yeah.
It's a bit surprising, you say, as an Englishman coming into this part of Norfolk and seeing so many icons to Our Lady, and devotional practices, which you're probably quite used to in Rome and southern Mediterranean countries.
Exactly, yes. It reminded me a bit of Malta, because Malta's it's quite very English in a way. Of course, they all speak English very well, but you have all this piety too, and you have these wonderful pictures of Our Lady and icons as well, on the buses and everywhere. But it's a bit like that here. It reminded me of that too. And it is unusual for England to have that. So it's very nice.
I mean, you are a foreign correspondent and have been for some time. What's the kind of challenge professionally working in a foreign country trying to report?
Yes.
I mean, or is it just the same challenges you would have if you were working as a reporter in this country?
Well, there are very similar challenges, of course, but there are different ones too. And obviously, the church is quite a specialised field. It's not something one can just sort of get into from switching from, say, business coverage to the church. But yes, and the Vatican, of course, has its own sort of dynamic as well. It's a bit like reading the tea leaves, but I don't go into that much myself. I prefer just to report, because I think from just reporting facts, people can find out and really decide for themselves what's going on.
You get access to some high-ranking prelates. You've famously interviewed a few, caught a few out along the way.
Well, not intentionally. Yeah.
Not intentionally, their own fault. Have you had the opportunity to interview Pope Francis? Is that ever going to be likely?
We've requested interviews. Unfortunately, he doesn't give them. He tends to only speak to the more sort of liberal press, so we haven't managed to get that, unfortunately. But of course, I've met him many times on the papal trips and things, and one can have a quick few words with him. But yes, no interviews yet. One day, hopefully, we'll do that.
One of the features of your reporting are those papal trips. What are they like? I don't know whether it's like being on tour with a rock band or something from some of the reporting I've seen.
Well, it is a bit. It's a great privilege. I actually love it. I think it's a wonderful chance to follow the Pope up close. You don't get to feel much about what's going on the ground because you're always with him in the papal pool, the press pool rather. So, but it is fascinating, and of course a lot of the my colleagues go just for the press conference at the end with the Pope, but that's always revealing too. It's always really interesting.
Do you get the real sense of being in the sort of the footsteps of Peter?
Yes, you do. Yeah, it's and wonderful to see the reception he gets too from the crowds and from the varied receptions. But by and large, it's you really get to see the charism that he brings, and the fact that he is the successor of Peter going out to the world, and it really helps the people. You can see how much they really love it.
I have this fantasy of one day Pope Francis just wandering into your office. He's so close to you there. In fact, he's 10 minutes walk, sitting down, said, "Edward, I've come to reveal all." Yes,
well, that would be nice. Yes, I don't think it's going to happen,
but is there ever a case where, because you've reported for so long from Rome, is there ever a case of sort of, Rome fatigue? Where you say, "Oh, I wish I could." Do the House of Parliament in London, or the Senate in the States, or something. Is there ever a moment when you think, well, I think I've had enough?
Some of the, as I was saying earlier, the internal politics can be very wearying.
Yeah,
and that can be quite tiresome at times, but you have to just keep going with breaks and so forth. But I always think, as my colleague John Allen says on Crux, I mean, he says it's the best journalistic beat you could possibly have, and I agree with him. It is fascinating. I mean, it encapsulates everything. It's not only the faith, but it's how the faith impacts politics, economics. It brings in all of the different fields of human exchange, and human relations. And I find that really is quite fascinating.
I'd probably go further and say that it also has a kind of supernatural or eschatological aspect. That you're dealing with something which is absolutely fundamental to the whole destiny of the human race.
And it's also current and topical, and it goes to the depths of all of those matters of politics, economics, and so forth. So it's a real sort of melting pot of all of those aspects of life. Yeah.
So you do television. I know you're regular on radio, EWTN Radio, and other radio outlets as well.
Register Radio.
Exactly, and you've also you're obviously constantly filing for the Register, and then now you're an author. This is your second book, I think.
Yes, yeah,
second published work.
Yes, first book was on the Family Synod back in 2015, which I looked at the alleged manipulations of the First Synod, but that was an e-book. This is sort of my first proper book.
Are you excited about it?
Yes, very much. Yeah. No, it's been. My main hope is that it's of real service to the Church. That's what I want it to be. I don't want it. It's not wanting to get into any of the politics at all. It's just to be provide a service to the cardinals and the faithful if there's a conclave in the next year or two. Yeah.
One of the features of your reporting, Edward, is that although it's an Edward Pentin article, it's objective and factual and analysis and interesting and all the rest of it, but you've managed to stay clear of becoming a kind of media personality, if I may say. Is that a deliberate choice?
Well, it is partly because I've always taken a rather perhaps old-fashioned view of journalism, which is it shouldn't be about the reporter, it's about reporting, and it's not about giving my own opinion so much as just telling the facts and giving the reader, equipping the reader with information so that they can make up their own mind. So yes, that's been my approach throughout, and I very much believe that. I don't think the reporter should become the story in any way, really. It should be, and if I have in the past, it's been unintentional.
Yes.
But that's been my sort of philosophy about it. Yeah.
I suppose would you say that's one of the temptations for a Catholic journalist, where you end up writing your story rather than his story?
Yeah, and I think for journalism in general today, especially with Twitter and social media, it's very tempting to put out your own opinion or weigh in with someone else's discussion about, because you often know quite a lot, but I think that's a temptation one should withstand, and just one already has a forum as a journalist to report, and that should be enough, I think.
Yeah. Now, I think we're walking up the steps here to what would have been the high altar.
Yes.
Where the priest would have made the sacrifice said the sacrifice of the Mass.
Yeah.
Do you see your work as a kind of spiritual sacrifice?
Yes, I do. I think it's. I hope that the work that one does is of some sort of sacrifice for the church and for the good of the church. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's. I wouldn't put myself on that sort of pedestal to say that I'm, you know, in any way different to anyone else. But I do see it as a very much a sort of a vocation. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you said you were a convert to the faith.
Yes.
I mean, one of the things that a lot of converts sometimes struggle with or are attracted to is the whole holy sacrifice of the Mass. I mean, was that
Right.
something that was part of your conversion story?
Yes, it was crucial. It was a huge impact on me was going to teach in Africa, in Tanzania, in the mid-90s, and I taught in a Benedictine mission, the Sanctotilian Fathers from Germany, and there was a sense, especially when I came back from there, but also there, that the Mass was real in the way that in the Anglican Church it was not, and it was the true faith, and the Christ was truly present in the Eucharist. That was, it was fairly quick, but it was a real conviction that was true, and that Christ is in the sacraments. The sacraments are all valid in the Catholic Church, and so when I came back from Tanzania, I felt almost it was impossible. It was like Chesterton said, once you see the elephant in the room, you can't say it's not there, you know. And it was true, and you couldn't just walk away. I had to become a Catholic. It was one of those things, but it was a grace I've never regretted, of course, and it was a huge realization that the true church is the Catholic Church. Yeah.
So it's amazing to think that for centuries the Mass was said here.
Right.
And
yes.
it's been silent for 500 years now.
Yes. Maybe to be restored, hopefully not so distant future.
Are you hopeful about that?
I am. I think there is. England will be reconverted at some point, but it's just a case of when. But I do hope certainly that it will, as do many, I think.
Well, we're actually stepping into what would have been the Lady Chapel, so in the monastery, and presumably there was an altar here as well. But
yeah.
we are in the 2020. We're in the year of the reconsecration of England,
right?
As Mary's dowry, and which is very linked to Walsingham.
Yes.
No such thing as a coincidence. So you visited Walsingham in that year. Well, what's your sort of sense of the spiritual significance of that event for England?
Well, I think it is a great sign that it could. I think there was the reconsecration of England to the Immaculate Heart. I think
that's right.
A couple of years,
2017. Yeah.
And I think these are all signs that there is perhaps a rebirth happening, or there will be. This is the sort of beginnings of it, perhaps the birth pangs of the reconversion of England. I certainly like to think it. I actually come from, as I say, Canterbury, and of course in Ramsgate. That's been the shrine of St Augustine, where he first landed, has been renovated thanks to this very good priest, Father Marcus Holden, who was there for a number of years. And that's also to me a sign too that there is this beginnings of a reconversion. Let's hope so anyway.
I mean, living abroad and coming back periodically, I assume maybe you have that sort of ability, just a greater perspective of the changes, whereas living in the middle of them, they look probably moving
possibly
at a glacial pace, whereas you probably think there's probably quite a lot of change, a lot of innovation.
Yes. I mean, I've also seen a lot of decline, of course, and there's been a huge falling away of the faith. But to me, that's possibly also a sign of the beginning. It has to sort of reach perhaps rock bottom, and then from there it'll work its way up. Let's hope so. But there seems to be that. Now is the time perhaps for the beginning of the reconversion. Things are pretty bad, I think, spiritually in the country, it seems to me, in many ways.
I'm sure you're familiar, Edward, with Chesterton's Everlasting Man, and that final wonderful sort of chapter where he talks about the church's, the death of the church type thing, and it's this idea that the church has died many times,
Yes.
and it keeps getting resurrected because
Right.
our God knew how to escape the tomb.
Right. Exactly.
And so whenever I hear of the imminent death of the church, be it a national in England, or be it in the world, or be it in Rome, or whatever,
Yes.
I tend to think it's just the moment before another resurrection. Do you
Right.
think that's too optimistic, too hopeful?
No, I think that's exactly how it is. At least for me. I mean, that's how the crucifixion was. I mean, everyone thought, well, that's it. You know, he's died, but then he resurrected. So, I think it happens again and again, as you say, and I think it will be the same for the church in England as well, and also in Rome too. I think Rome is going through a certain, I wouldn't say maybe a collapse of some sort, but certainly a big change is happening, and hopefully there'll be a resurrection of something much better. Yeah.
Let's hope. Edward, in spite of everything you've seen, everything you've had to report on,
Yes.
and the day-to-day machinations which, as you say, drag down Catholic journalists, in Rome, do you still sense the Holy Spirit? Do you still sense the Good Shepherd guiding his church all the way to the end of time?
One does, although one has to look at times quite hard to find or to see him. But yes, I think it's true. The thing is, it's the church is. Some say, and you hear it quite a bit in Rome now, that she's going through her passion, and can be a very dark time, and so you have to look carefully to see the Holy Spirit working through all of this. But as I say, I try to just keep to reporting what's happening and what's going on, and to me that is in a way to catalogue what's happening is for those who have eyes to see will see that the Holy Spirit being guided or not guiding the church. And personally, I think, of course, the Holy Spirit is always guiding the church, but yeah, it is not always easy to see. Yeah.
And of course, St. Joseph and Our Lady as well, no doubt, keeping
Exactly.
Our Lady's mantle is keeping us all safe, I guess.
Yes, one has to keep obviously praying and hoping that's that there'll be better times ahead.
Well, on behalf of everybody who reads the Register or watches EWTN, we'd like to thank you for all your reporting from Rome over the years. You are a sure and fixed point in a very stormy sea at the moment, and we're really grateful for you being there.
Right, well, thank you, Kevin. Great to talk to you and be with you.
And really nice to have you here in Walsingham.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here at last.